Jentry Chau vs. the Underworld is one of 2 shows released in 2024 that give me hope for the future of Western animation. The show follows barely 16-year-old Jentry as she navigates the problems being a high school girl with terrifying magical fire powers can cause. She hunts demons, talks to boys, talks to ghosts, goes to the fair, lives life alongside the fantastical. In much the same way characters like Ben from Ben 10 experienced life and learned lessons alongside weird supernatural stuff in their lives. Where I could predict Ben 10's general plot, though, I could not predict Jentry Chau's. Every episode had me guessing what was going to happen and when, and I was only able to put those pieces together when doing so filled me with dread, when the writers wanted me to. The twists and turns this show takes you on are pretty innovative, to the point where the social stuff got to be scarier than the fights for me. Which, yes, are scary. Animation has a lot of trouble eliciting fear in its audience as a general rule, but the glitch effects this show uses for its demons do that pretty handily. It does have jump scare elements, which I know some people think are cheap, but they're handled well here. The monsters in this show feel less like spectacle opportunities and more like genuine threats to the protagonists' lives, which says even more about the mundane miscommunication-based social drama that pervades the rest of the show. Whether it's cringe or rage or genuine sadness, the drama and trauma in the lives of these characters will keep you glued to the screen, which leads to emotional swells that had me swimming in tears. The show is wonderful. And yet, it makes a mistake that I haven't been able to help noticing in most animated media these days. Like a thorn that keeps digging into your hand when you stop to smell the roses, this issue has kept me from enjoying many romantic subplots over the years. And I know how much harder it is for the people that thorn is supposed to represent. I'm Jordan Szymanski, Edgar Allan Poe's illegitimate descendant, and I'm gonna tell you about the way animation treats women in romantic subplots involving people of color. So, let's address something real quick. All of the main characters of Jentry Chau vs. the Underworld are non-white. Jentry herself is Chinese, Kit is nebulously Asian, Michael Ole is Nigerian-American, and his girlfriend at the start of the series, Stella Gonzalez, is of course Latina. There's any number of potential additions to any of these characters ethnically speaking, we're just establishing our groundwork. So one can safely say any romantic subplot in the show will involve non-white characters, and it is a drama show, so those romantic subplots having a lot of angst and negativity in them is par for the course. And it also makes this show a good starting point for our discussion because we're not so much talking about racism here as we are colorism. For those who don't know, colorism is prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone. And just like with garden variety racism, you can have blatant colorism and you can have more subtle colorism. This video will mostly be focusing on the latter. This is all pretty basic, but some of the most subtle prejudice in the world comes in the way we write and tell stories, in the way we accent our characters, in the way we draw and animate them. And Jentry Chau has some of this prejudice baked in. Not a ton, mind you. The show treats its POC characters far better than many others do, some of which I'll discuss later, but the bias is still there, working in favor of the main character. Jentry Chau is a mixed Chinese girl whose heritage plays a massive role in her life, and that can be seen in as minute details as her taste in music. Stella Gonzalez is an abundantly kind Latina girl who goes through way more than she should have to. I'm about to spoil some of the juicier bits of the show's drama here, but basically, Stella has a boyfriend that she adores at the start of the show. Then she finds out he's been hiding a secret passion for flute to not disappoint his parents or her, all of whom think he wants to play professional American football. This gets Stella understandably upset because it calls into question his trust in her, and makes her wonder if she even knows who he really is. So they mutually decide to break up. Then Michael gives up on pursuing a part in the band and continues playing football in an attempt to get a sports scholarship, which, more understandably, pisses Stella off because it reads as him looking for an excuse to break up with her. Also, he can be with his childhood friend, a childhood friend who has proven time and time again to be a danger to those around her. This all must feel immensely degrading and devaluing to Stella as a person. And even after all that, she still accepts what happens. She helps Jentry preserve some of her dignity, encourages her to pursue a relationship with Michael, and decides to be her friend regardless. She's a teenager, they all are, and all of them miscommunicated and made mistakes, and she's willing to move past that. She's ready to be the bigger person here, which I think is both a wise decision on the part of the writers of this show and emblematic of the very problem we're talking about. Speaking just about skin tone here, there is very little differentiating differentiating Jentry from the white characters of the show. There's plenty structurally in build and writing, but in color, almost nothing sets them apart. Stella, however, is noticeably darker skinned and just so happens to wind up with no love interest, while Jentry herself has two guys vying for her attention. Even worse, one of those guys broke up with Stella in part to pursue a relationship with Jentry. He objectively chose Jentry over Stella, which is his choice, and I think in this instance it was the right one. But I wouldn't be talking about this if I only had one example. Danny Phantom features two love interests for its main protagonist, one who is tangentially involved with the supernatural by being friends with him a while and is very goth and white, and another who actively participates in the supernatural world, kicks serious ass, and is very pop and black. Yet despite Valerie being the more interesting character and having more in common with Danny, Sam gets more screen time. Sam gets to be more involved with Danny's day-to-day life. Sam gets Danny. Yes, she has a lot of fans. Hell, I'm one of them. I love a good goth girl in my spooky show. But giving up an inclusive power couple built from the enemies to lovers trope that has better chemistry to keep the male hero power fantasy of protecting a pale waifu is not great. That was Butch Fartman's work though. We can't reasonably expect better from him. So how about Arcane? For all of the person who hasn't seen Arcane, first, I get it. League had me fucked up too. Second, it's a truly masterful story about bonds and the many ways they can fracture, stabilize, break, and reform. It includes a lot of interesting dynamics between people who by all accounts deserve better than what they got in life. Among these are Jace, a genuinely brilliant man whom everyone doubts until they don't anymore and he starts doing it for them, and Mel, a badass in every possible way who starts believing in that doubtful genius and then gets to actually deal with the problems he causes. That's a gross oversimplification that doesn't hold up through the second season. There's way too much that happens to summarize every detail, but essentially the entire series, Mel is the only one who can balance Jace out and get him thinking properly. But she is also a product of Noxus, which is easily the most warmongering nation in Runeterra, which is extra unfortunate when her producer shows up in late season 1 to tell her how to do her job. For the first season, Jace and Mel carry on a reasonably functional romance with some issues, but each of them helps the other deal with those issues, and it's honestly beautiful. It's just slightly undercut by how Sky Young, the barely mentioned love interest of Victor, gets turned to fucking ash, saving his life from the thing he invented. I'm sorry, was that a little jarring? It's not much better in context. She does show up in a fashion in season 2, but that's 3 whole years later in real time, and she's still not really alive. We don't get to learn anything about her really, besides the advice she gives Victor in this spectral form. A form which he then sacrifices to gain greater power. And by the time Sky emerges in that minor fashion, Mel has been whisked away into a magic prison and has her own arc completely separated from the rest of the plot, only to return just in time for Jace to accuse her of lying to him and not saving enough people when her magic first awakened. Yeah, like I said, too much to explain. Honorable mention to the entire episode Echo spent in an alternate dimension, falling in love with Powder only to leave that life behind. All the romantic relationships in this show are multi-ethnic, and the only one that ends remotely well is between a white woman and an Asian woman. Yes, that one is gay, that's awesome, I'm glad somebody got a win, but could just one of those people have darker skin tones than Pantone 77? I know that's asking a lot, considering League of Legends makes most of its content for China, and their market is allergic to that level of complexity. The fact that we have as much representation as we got from this show with that context is no less than a miracle. But I don't think it's good form to applaud a show for including black people when a large portion of those inclusions either die or lose their partner, which is what this video is about. How often multi-ethnic relationships are written into a show only to end in tragedy or breakup. This trope pervades not just animation, but a lot of Western media. And though we're seeing some exceptions to it begin to rise in popularity, rooting it out is like cutting tumors. They just keep growing. Which brings us back to Jentry. It's great that we have an Asian black couple in animation. Huge win for diversity as a whole. But did it have to come at the cost of a kind, insightful young woman having her emotions played with? Did it have to include a second, darker-skinned woman who's not even named being written into the show just to make Jentry jealous? I know they're all just characters, but someone identifies with Stella and feels the things that character would feel. The betrayal, the pain, the sadness, even the acceptance and forgiveness come from human experience and inform more of it. I don't think it's wrong for Stella and Michael to break up. They don't mesh very well as characters, and it's normal for teens to have at least one relationship end poorly. But I do think it's wrong for Stella to be left with no one by the end of the story. Just a token hint of possibilities with another character at the tail end of the season. Her ex and new best friend get together and she's just left by the wayside? Yes, that's a human experience too, but it's one that's been told over and over again by story after story, specifically about women with darker skin tones. Assuming they and or their partners don't die without or with ceremony respectively, they're treated as the false positive, the bad first choice. I'm gonna linger on this one for a bit because I genuinely forgot that the Spectacular Spider-Man went this direction with its plot. Peter and Liz get romantically involved after he manages to grab her attention by tutoring her, and it's treated as a problem by the rest of the cast. Gwen has been there longer, had a crush on him longer, kissed him first, and she didn't act on any of that nearly as much as Liz did. Which says something more offensive about white women actually. It perpetuates the false advice and stereotype that a woman asking a guy out or making a move on him is being pushy, which is very much a product of the show's time. And on top of that, rather than give Peter and Liz's growing romance the attention it deserves, the show puts its focus on Gwen's distress and Peter's needlessly conflicted emotions. It falls into what I like to call the Quentin Coldwater effect, where the writers of a show pour so much time, energy, and money into fixing a broken ship when there's a perfectly sailable one 10 feet away. Oh, but this one has a fancy name and a history to it, and also the comic nerds will crucify us if we deviate from established canon. Superheroes especially have this weird thing where the love interest from like 12 reboots prior just has to be involved with the new narrative, often as the new version of the old soup's main squeeze. They are getting braver in making changes to that canon, like with My Adventures with Superman giving Lois Lane some melanin and a personality. But in almost every other instance, the partner must be the same. And we all know where this is going, so let me just rip off the band-aid. The Black Cat and Catwoman stuff needs to stop, guys. I know I was talking up the enemies to lovers trope earlier, but you always treat these women as sexy seductress thieves, prove they've got a conscience to make the audience think they're redeemable, have them give the hero a kiss, and never explore that relationship further. Enemies to lovers is a good trope because it necessitates growth or degradation on the moral scale and spices it up with good chemistry. But that's not what these characters are doing. They exist to give young men fantasies about the women in question to keep them buying more comics or watching more of the show. I understand the marketing behind them, I just think that we can have that while giving them a little more substance and meaning. Also, could we stop demonizing black cats? The superstitious folks in the audience have enough to get therapy about without adding sexy Halloween costumes to the mix. Okay, sorry for that little tangent. Let's get back on topic with Jentry Chau versus the You thought you were safe! This video is not an excuse for me to put the Amber hate arguments to bed, but damn if it doesn't provide ample opportunity to do so. I am going to elucidate every piece of Invincible's romance subplots from the perspective of someone who adores Amber's writing. If that makes you angry or uncomfortable at any point, good. We need more discomfort on this, not less. Discomfort is how people change and grow when they don't agree with one another. So let's have ourselves a growth spurt. The will they won't they between Amber, Mark, and Eve lasts for Invincible's first couple of episodes and, might I add, introduces Amber as an option first. Mark getting his ass kicked by Todd, who gets his balls kicked by Amber, is a back and forth that introduces us and Amber to Mark's stubborn refusal to let bad things happen. This desire to help naturally endears him to a woman who's as politically active as Amber is or wants to be, an intellectual bond instead of an aesthetic one. Then Mark meets Eve, a real hero, someone who's playful and fun to talk to. They have their flyby scene where we get to see some decent chemistry between the two. Chemistry that's shot down by Rex and Eve's kiss, but we get the foreshadowing, there's potential here. The issue is, that's all there is, potential. Eve doesn't try to make a move until it's too late, which makes me feel a little weird. 3 of the shows I mentioned in this video have a timid white girl who's not ready to act on her feelings lose the guy to a go-getter black girl. And again, that feels more hurtful to the white girls involved. You're telling me Eve let Rex cheat on her multiple times before Kate? That Sam got into multiple life-threatening crises with Danny without learning to live a little faster and bolder? That Gwen the Look Stacy social awkwardnessed her way into being a trophy girlfriend for Harry Osborn? Fucking ew! Eve demonstrates a lot more agency than all that in the rest of the series, so I kinda get where some folks come from when they call the Amber-Mark romance forced. They're saying it's weird that Eve dated Rex at all, or at least waited this long to pursue Mark. And I agree with that, but there's nothing weird about Amber pursuing Mark immediately besides her leniency with his ditching her on the first date. This is the thing I don't hear enough people talking about. From day one, Mark was pulling this shit and Amber put up with it. It took a while for her to get upset with him about it, and when she does, people like to pull out this scene. Claim that Amber knowing Mark is a superhero doesn't make any sense with her being upset. She wants to help people. How can she be mad that Mark is saving lives? Here's the thing. Amber doesn't know that Mark's in it to save lives. Look at the new Guardians of the Globe. It takes 3 near-death experiences among their team for them to finally stop focusing on their own little prize fights and actually prioritize serving the public. And those are the best heroes Earth has to offer. Not even mentioning all the superheroes with relationships in shambles for reasons completely unrelated to their heroism. Learning that Mark is a superhero does not automatically give him more trust points. If anything, it calls more things into question. Superheroes inherently have a reputation for being fame seekers. The kind of people who do good things solely for clout. With that context, their first interaction could have been manipulative. Mark deciding it's worth getting his ass beat to ingratiate himself with a hot girl. And then there's the secret identity. In season 1, Mark doesn't need one, because Nolan doesn't need one. No villain is gonna be stupid enough to fuck around and find out with Omni-Man. The two don't remotely hide their familial bond with the costumes on, so fucking with Invincible's loved ones is fucking with Omni-Man's son. Maybe some maniacs will still try, but they'll fail because we are talking about Superman without the laser eyes and moral compass. Maybe not every villain knows that last bit, but they'll find out real quick if they try to hurt Debbie. Mark doesn't have a secret identity out of necessity in season 1, he has it out of convenience. It allows him to not get harassed at school, continue pretending to be normal when he's not saving lives. And the real reason his identity is secret is because Nolan wants it to be, because Nolan is planning to betray Earth. He travels to learn the world's weaknesses, he writes books to keep up appearances and keep the lights on. He becomes a hero to get close to the world's strongest weapons so he can dismantle them. And he hides his identity so as not to draw suspicion from those people. Even if they know who he is, the fact that he doesn't tell everyone means he's more like them. He's not Spider-Man. He's Spider-Man. Mark puts on the mask because that's what heroes do in his culture, and it'll make his dad proud. That's really it. It has the added benefit of keeping his friends safe, but that's because his enemies don't know who he is. There is no way that telling Amber he's invincible would endanger her or his family more than just being around her would. It's not exactly the best kept secret in the world anyway. I guarantee you Cecil has a file on Mark in the GDA's database which has been proven hackable by the brilliant minds of this world. People can't prepare for a danger they can't predict, so as long as Mark's friends and girlfriend remain oblivious to his heroics, they will be unalert and vulnerable. Telling them would at least allow them to be ready to run when they are near him, which does add more stress to his relationships, but that's part of the job. And while we're on this one, William's pissed at Mark too, right? When he finds out about Mark's powers, he demands a fly session and threatens Mark's identity to do it. Yes, he's also geeking out, but that doesn't mean he's not angry. If you want to argue that Mark has little reason to trust Amber, given that they've been together for at most a few months, what reason does he have to distrust William? By all appearances, they seem like they've been friends for a long time, at least a year. For Mark not to tell him means who knows and who doesn't isn't a question of trust. At least, not his. And if you disregard all of that, it still doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long Mark and Amber have been together. It doesn't matter what society says about the way superheroes are or behave. Mark loves Amber. He makes that clear time and time again. And to be in love with someone without being ready to trust them with information about your life is a deception. Whether it's a lie to yourself or to them, a lie is a lie. He's not the only one at fault, though. I think if Amber was going to hold to these boundaries, she probably should have done it on the first date. Mark's a terrible liar, and him dipping out like this is a serious red flag. For Amber to ignore that is a mistake on her part. She is a little picky about when these things matter to her in the beginning. She's still a teenager, the same as Mark, and makes her own slip-ups in their early days. But that's not the way people talk about Season 1 Amber. They talk about her like she's the worst.
In well-written stories, characters like her tend to be hiding or compensating for some deeply ingrained weakness that helps ground them.
Trying to shame him into admitting his secret identity to her because she wanted to hear it from him in that moment by emasculating and embarrassing him in front of his friends in the public.
Memories of someone vile, so toxic, and so
Fly away, flyboy.
stupid.
I understand anyone who thinks that even the minor clips I throw in on the side don't present enough evidence for this theory about the way women are treated in romantic subplots with an ethnic spectrum. There are far more animations out there than what I reference in this video, and I'm sure I missed some examples of multi-ethnic romantic relationships that end well in that pile. Hell, I can even name a few. Avatar: The Last Airbender, Castlevania, Code Lyoko, I think. But the online discourse about these ships varies from insensitive to downright hateful. Zutara was endgame. William and Ulrich can share Yumi. How could Richter leave our magical girl that way? Yeah, shippers come out in force over every story, including the ones I've already discussed, but there are enough examples of vitriol being levied at POC characters in fiction that it raises my discomfort alarm a little bit. And because people are going to come at me for just mentioning these ones, I know Katara's not the part of Katang that people disagree with, I know most people preaching polyamory in Code Lyoko just want all the characters to be happy, and I know there are some people that hear friends from childhood and immediately push the dolls together. I just can't help but feel a little disheartened every time it steps over a ship with genuine chemistry. Yumi doesn't strike me as a multi-partner kind of girl, and William doesn't strike me as the type of guy to get stuck on her. Zutara has a lot more I can fix him energy than Katang does, and that vibe doesn't lend well to a partnership between equals. Plus, I don't like the idea of May ending up alone. She's had enough of that. And Richtenard is as sickening a ship in concept as the name is to say. It kind of baffles me that anybody can see these two as something other than surrogate siblings. But even disregarding that, Annette is everything Richter wants to be. And Richter is exactly the kind of support Annette needs. They build on each other, they teach each other, they guide each other just by being who they are. They come from different worlds, but they fit together nicely. And that's exactly what I personally want in a relationship. I want someone with different life experience who can teach me about the world and help me grow as a person. Someone I can supply the same assistance and advice to about different things in different ways. That's what partnership is to me, and the partner I have now fits that bill perfectly. I'll readily admit to a bias on this front. I love multi-ethnic relationships. What you look like determines a lot of what your life will be like in this world, and it is such a small part of the influence that lies in a person's heritage. There's such a massive rainbow of lifestyles and cultures and possibilities in this world, and I love sharing mine. And I'm so happy when other people share theirs. So I get excited when I see that happen in my favorite shows. And likewise get disheartened when it ends so often in tragedy. It feels like a personal attack, like the show is saying relationships like this are doomed to fail, which is an already long-standing prejudice in our culture today, one that makes itself very vocal in the case of Amber. I'm sure that the majority of people who had a problem with her in season 1 felt no animosity towards her ethnicity. There's enough to misunderstand and misinterpret in her words and behavior that it doesn't have to have anything to do with race, but I also know that it does. For a lot of people, whether they are aware of it or not. And when it doesn't have something to do with race, it most definitely has something to do with sex. Having been a self-conscious, self-loathing teenage boy before, I can confidently explain where some of the hate for Amber comes from. That being the assumption that if we, men, are good people, then the people we like ought to reciprocate that feeling. That we are owed returns on our emotional investment in the form of romantic feelings or sexual attraction. This could be because of many things, from the shows we watch to the things our fathers tell us. We view our love as a gift that we give to other people, and not as an emotion we experience and are responsible for. This is a general statement that ignores proper emotional growth and therapy. There are exceptions to every rule. And I would argue that most men these days will get over that misconception eventually. But based on the comments I've gotten on my other Invincible videos, I can pretty safely say a lot of Amber's hate groupies fall into this category. People who think that Mark being in a relationship with Amber is in itself a gift to her, when it's not. Mark gives up nothing by spending time with her because it's what he wants to do, more than anything else at the time he does it. His presence is not a blessing unto her, nor are the gifts he gives in place of it. So she does not owe him forgiveness or a return on his emotions. Mark's love is not a gift, it's a transaction. and for very valid reasons, he doesn't uphold his end of the agreement. He gives up spending time with her to do the things he needs to do, to save lives, and in Season 1, to placate his father's whims, none of which are things Amber directly sees until the last episode of Season 1, when she gets to see what Mark being a hero means to him. She gets to watch Mark get beaten bloody trying to save the people of Earth. No posing for the camera or treating this as a prize fight, no running away when he realizes he's in over his head. Lots of people have commented on Amber's behavior in Season 2 being jarring, and it is at first, but it only takes a few seconds of careful review to justify its authenticity. Before that, all Amber knows is that Mark's a superhero, not how he behaves as a superhero. Even if she saw footage of him online, not all of it would be flattering. And no, the cyborg scene doesn't count. Amber was the one directing the crowd away from the scene, thereby saving lives. The only life Mark directly saved was William, a person he's personally invested in. The rest of the scene is him engaging in what could easily be misinterpreted as a prize fight given the amount of preventable property damage. That's an incorrect observation, but it's one any layperson could reasonably have because they aren't the one fighting. But the people who dislike Amber don't put that much thought into it, do they? They take what they see at face value, without thinking about what Amber has observed and what she would think about it. Empathy isn't something you can teach, but it is something you can learn. It's just a matter of wanting to. And unfortunately, while we are making some great strides in the right direction when it comes to including multi-ethnic relationships that turn out very well, we seem to be sliding backwards in the audience's capacity for empathy regarding them. Jentry Chau is a troubled girl. Every main character in her series is troubled. That's why it's a good show. They're all teenagers, and that informs everything in how they behave and what they choose to do. Kit is all the guys I just talked about. He goes through a lot of trouble to keep Jentry safe and thinks he's owed something for it. Thinks that's what romance is. Michael is Mark, buckles under the expectations of his parents and his girlfriend and doesn't know how to handle all of that. Stella is Amber. She feels lied to, stupid, and unimportant to the person that she thought she loved. And Jentry has all of that, plus a little extra. A parental figure with high expectations, strange powers that are hard to control and based on her emotions, potentially an allegory for wild mood swings due to puberty or the onset of a mental disorder, crushes on Michael and Kit that are complicated by things going on in her and their lives, abandoning those feelings at different points in the story because of those complications, and being lied to by almost everyone she knows. Jentry goes through so much in just 13 episodes, which is perfect as a portrayal of teenage experience, and makes her the perfect punching bag for people looking to vent their frustrations. How could she push Kit away like that? How could she date Michael after he broke up with Stella? They're supposed to be friends. How dare she say those hurtful things to Ed? You don't treat our short king that way. This show is a prime example of people missing the forest for the trees in regards to women in animation. Context is often disregarded when the character says or does something that could be read in a negative light. The fact that Kit is a demon who until very recently was trying to steal Jentry's soul for Chang and is also centuries old while she's still a teenager. The fact that Stella pushes Jentry to ask Michael out, doesn't just say it's okay, pushes her to do it. The fact that Ed was recording one of Gentry's most sensitive emotional moments to post it online for clout. Jentry has valid reasons for everything she does. Maybe she goes a little far sometimes, but
she's 16!
She deserves a little bit of leeway, at least as much as Mark does. If you think that I'm wrong about this, that all or even most of the female characters I've brought up in this video are victims of tragic circumstance, or bad people who deserve what happened to them, then we still have a question to answer. Why are so many characters in animation that are victims of tragic circumstance involved with romance women of color? Why do characters like Liz and Michael's unnamed third girlfriend in Jentry, Chau vs. the Underworld only get focus on their happiness when it makes the female lead jealous? Why was Amber, the bad first girlfriend, written to be black in the animation while Eve was left white? Why is it so rare to see a good, healthy relationship between two people of different ethnicities in animation rather than the immediate alternative? I would love to be proven wrong about this, to see some representation of good multi-ethnic relationships, or even bad relationships featuring just white characters, because the latter is just as thin on the ground as the former in my experience. I've never seen the bad ex in animation be white. I've never seen the white girlfriend feel alienated by her boyfriend's family. I've never seen either of those things represented by white men, and all of these are common human experiences that deserve to be represented. represented. Like I said, all of this is already getting better. And contrary to popular belief, I do love building things up just as much as I enjoy the occasional teardown. This video is not meant to trash talk the shows that represent many cultures and push the boundaries of what animation can be. It is meant to suggest to creators and audience members a potential next step forward. Question the assumed authenticity of your characters, learn what stereotypes exist and how to avoid or play on them if that's what your story is meant to do. There are a million ways to write, and good writing is any writing that works. Boondocks exists for a good fucking reason. Just be aware of what you're doing. And for audience members, maybe hold off on the snap judgment game, and if you can't, maybe consider going to therapy. It sure as shit helped me. Shout out to Eliath Goliath for their contributions to the channel, push buttons if you wanna, click links if you're curious, and most importantly, take it easy. I'll catch y'all later. Peace.